Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here today with my friend Deirdre to share with you just a bit about a book that she's written called When There Are Few Words. Um, I'm, of course, delighted to be here because Deirdre is my very special friend, but I also really believe that this book can, already has been, and will be so useful to so many people. Um, Deirdre in this book is exploring some of the questions that might arise for you, um, caring for or being with somebody who's at end of life. And I know from my own experience that very often we don't have a lot of information about that. It can be a frightening time, it can be a painful time, um, it's an exhausting time. Um, and despite the fact that dying is such a natural part of life, it seems to be a topic that we don't talk about very often. Or it comes in very medicalized language. We're talking around illness and all those very human relational issues and practicalities actually around this time are lost. So this is really just an opportunity in this video to actually meet Deirdre, who has written this book, who is the person behind this. Deirdre has been a palliative end of life social worker, has worked in this field many years and has a lot of experience to bring to that. What I love about the book is that it's written in plain language. You know, this is about for you, for me, who don't know much about this. Um, and yeah, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello. I suppose two parts to answer your question, Lisa. And one is the as a specialist palliative care social worker, I was often in the homes and within the family of someone who was at end of life, and I was struck so many times at the information or the questions that people had at that time and would have asked me about. And I noticed very often some of the same questions arising for people. For example, how will we know? What should I say? I don't even know, how to be with someone or what I should be doing. So then I was also very conscious of all the people who don't have someone like me or a member of a specialist palliative care team coming into their homes, because most of us live out our lives in our own homes, in the hearts of our own community. So I was thinking, some of these questions must be around for my neighbours, my friends, and who do they ask? Because very often people aren't in a lot of contact with health or social care staff.
Mm.
Um, so I thought this is a book that might be useful to people outside of health and social care. It might be useful for, as I say, people like my neighbours, like my sister and brothers, um, just to help explore some of the questions that might come up for them. Because even though, as you rightly say, Lisa, coming to end of life and dying is part of all of our life experience, will be part of all of our life experience. But it's a first time for us very often, and we really find ourselves at a loss. And at a time like this, I think it is so important to have some wee bit of guidance and some wee bit of companionship that might help make what is a really sore time that even just a little bit easier.
Mm.
So that's those for those two reasons, Lisa, I wanted to write this book.
And I think that's just it. I know from my own experience, having to phone a friend who was a palliative care nurse saying, I don't know if this person I love is dying. Do I need to go? And it can be, even when you're already distressed, disorientated, sometimes you can't hear what people are saying. Even if a doctor is communicating or somebody's communicating with you, you actually can't hear what that is, or you might be too afraid. And then it's also about wanting to do the right thing at the time. What is the right thing? And I think what is so useful about this book is the very practical examples and guidance you give around the questions and around some of, those issues. But it's also the way in which you do that, which I think is so important for people to be aware of and to know. Really, I guess when you're reading a book like this, is to know that it is written with compassion, it is written with pause, it is written with an awareness of, what people are going through, and what they might be experiencing at the time. And I think that's so important to know as well. And a number of people have said in reviews about the book, and it's in Kelly wrote in the introduction as well, it's about being in safe hands. And I think for me, it's important, when we're talking about this, to say that reassure people that you are in safe hands with this. So I wonder if it would be useful, Deirdre, just to maybe tell us a bit about what are the chapters in the book? What are those kind of questions that people might be asking?
Maybe just to add into what you've said, Lisa, is that, very often there is no right way. There is no right way. So what I am really trying to reassure people about is that for any of us, our best hope is that we do the best we can. Holding the person who is at end of life and dying at the centre. So some of the questions that have come up again and again for me, and I'm also very conscious that people will have other questions that I haven't addressed, so many questions. But to keep the book manageable, what I did was I thought about what are the most common ones that I have been asked. So, I talk about that question that might be asked of someone, which is, am I dying? And how we might respond to that. I suppose for a lot of us, our inclination is in care and generosity and kindness is to say, oh, not at all, no, you're not. So what I'm inviting people to consider in the book is that why that question might be really important and why it might be really useful to explore that a wee bit more with the person. For example, that question about what do I say? The book covers questions about communication, and as you said, Lisa, because it's such a stressful time for people, even if we are getting information from our GP or that, it can be hard to hear it, and if we hear it, we may not fully understand what has been said to us. Another question is, what can I expect? How will I know? And that's a big question for people, and that's probably a difficult question to cover in the book because it is a bit stark. And I try to do that as gently as I can. How can I spend time? How might I spend time with someone who is dying? What if there's conflict or family estrangement? How do we manage that? How do we navigate that time at a time? End of life and dying is a time that is already fraught for us because of the very strong emotions that we're feeling. And then if you add into that the complexity of estrangement or family conflict. So I address that as well. talk about resuscitation, why doctors might be approaching that subject.
And I'm sorry, can I say I found that a really useful chapter to read, because even in my own work, I hear people talking about it and people's response to hearing that, when it's said about a person that they're caring for. So it was actually really useful to understand that, because I hadn't known the information that you put in there and just the resources that you linked to as well. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's and there are 12, I think 12 sections, but the last section is kind of very short explorations on some of those other questions, like, what do I say to the children? What happens now? So, in the immediate aftermath of someone's death, what are practically some of the things that we need to attend to? So I just, in summary fashion, deal with some of those. The other question, I suppose, that's really important and has been for me is, what about me? What about when my time comes? How can I try and get what I would like? And I cover that in the book. I explore that in the book, because I think for any of us who are willing to take some time to sit and consider the reality of our own mortality and think about, when that time comes for me at end of life, what would I like? Who would I like to be around? Um, what are some of the treatments that I would or wouldn't want? Maybe even think about how my my funeral liturgy might look, practical things like that, or writing a will and so on. So one of the chapters explores that, and the reason I feel so strongly about that kind of forward thinking is because, in my own experience and in the experience of people that I've worked with, if I can risk taking time now when I'm well to think ahead like that, it it can unburden me of fear and worry and anxiety. And if I talk to someone close to me about what I would like, it certainly will unburden them, because they're clear about what it was that I said. So that whole that chapter, I think, for me is really important one. It's known in health and social care as advanced care planning. And so I talk about that as well, and I think that is important. And then we live our lives.
And I think what's also, just to say on that, what's also so important with that planning is about family as well, or loved ones or people around, because especially, and you mentioned in the book about coming from a bigger family, and your mum and dad, because you share some stories as well, that they were very clear. And when there are a whole lot of people maybe with all their ideas about what, or you imagine, because you haven't actually had the conversation, so you assume what people might want. And this actually just takes care. And that's something, you're respecting the person's wishes, but you're also taking that additional stress at an already stressful time out of the way. Yeah. I think also to say, in the process of writing the book, so what I found so useful about it, and a few people have said as well, is that the book is written so you have the question, and Deirdre goes into a bit more detail with those questions. And just to say as well that a lot of it is an invitation to consider. I think, that's so helpful, because as you said, there is no right or wrong way, but it's about actually practical things to be thinking about around questions that you might want to ask. But then at the end of each chapter, there's also a summary. So if you're needing to go quickly to something, or you're exhausted, or your brain just can't take in everything, you can actually go to the end of the chapter and look at a few key points from that particular question that are in there. And then you've also included photographs and reflections at the end of each chapter. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
I am, because of the gravity of the book, the content of the book, which is about questions that might arise at the end of life. and dying. That is a grave, solemn subject. And I think for me, and I suspect maybe for some other people, something to soften that is helpful. Um, so what I wanted to include in the book is after the density of the text and the gravity of the content of that there was something wholesome in and visual for people, just to lift their hearts or to help tend their hearts. So there's all the photographs are from nature, photographs that I took. And so, as I say, just to help people access the information, maybe or to be reassured in some way. There's a gentleness, I think, in the images. Mm-hmm. And then I also wrote a reflection, a lot just following the image. So there's a reflection on each of the questions that have been explored, and they were my on the back of my reflection. So they were my response to the particular question as I sat quietly with the question at the end. So some of them read like poetry, if you'll forgive me using that term, but just a softening of what is a sore time for people. So I'm hoping that those images and reflections offer a wee bit of tenderness and a holding for people at this very difficult time in anybody's life.
I think that's what I love, excuse me, about them actually, is because there's the very practical issues around this, and there's all the many other layers that come with this topic. And I think just having space, and there's an invitation in the book to take space, to take pause. There's a place for notes there as well, you know. Yeah, so thank you for that. I'm wondering if there's anything before we wrap up that you feel we haven't covered. That you would.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. I suppose you mentioned the word invitation, Lisa, at the outset, and again, and this is very much invitation. It's not about a sales pitch. Oh, go out and buy a book. It is to let you know that if you think this might be useful to you, it is available there. It has been written. It is available. And it might be useful, but the important thing is that there is a wee bit of guidance somewhere that might help at what is a very difficult time.
Yeah. And I guess for me, why I'm doing this interview is exactly that reason, is that this is an invitation. It's about a subject that is, I think, we don't have access to this. I haven't found access to much like this. And it is about that invitation that could potentially really be transformative, to have somebody who can journey alongside with some of these very big questions, at a time we're all going to come to face. And that's very empowering, actually. That makes that time, can just bring those elements that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that's what the offering is for me.
My hope, I suppose, too, Lisa, in addition to that, is that if we are able to walk this difficult road in the best way we possibly can with information, some of the regrets that people can carry into their grief and bereavement can be allayed. Many times I've heard people saying, I wish I had, or I wonder, should I? So there's a lot that can come up a lot for people in their bereavement. in the aftermath, in the days and weeks and months and years following the death of someone close to us, those regrets or fears that maybe they didn't do. So my hope is that with the guidance, with the exploration that the book offers and invites us to, that it can allay some of those complexities in bereavement.
Yeah, and I think another reassurance in this is you talk about it also again from your own experience and with others, is about sometimes things can't go the way that you hope they'll go, you know, and it's almost knowing. And I think somebody actually who reviewed the book, who read the book, said that it was so reassuring just to know that she wasn't on her own in that, you know, and that we can't, there's some things that are out of our control with this. And I think, sometimes just not being on our own, knowing this is not just my experience.
Yeah, and maybe just the practical example of what that might be like, so that people can root it somewhere, is, some people have broken their hearts after someone close to them has died because they weren't able to be present, physically present with the person, and that has been, they carry the pain of that. So in fact, Lisa, as you rightly say, sometimes despite our best desire to be physically present, it isn't possible for whatever reason. But there are other ways for us to be mindfully present to the person.
Thank you. So I wonder, as we finish off here, just to invite anybody listening, that the book can be bought on Amazon, can also go directly. I'll put links in anyway, where people can order the book if they would like. Hopefully the libraries will start stocking it as well, so people will have access to it there. But I'm wondering, just as we finish, and to invite you as well, even just having listened, to take some time when this finishes, just to be with maybe how that's landed for you. Sometimes when we talk about these things and you're in this, you're very comfortable with this, you're knowledgeable about it. It can be, as we're listening, that kind of, so just to go gently with that, as Deirdre invites throughout the book, but just to be aware of that and to go gently. And just, if I can ask you to finish with the poem that you finished the book with, called Hope. I think it would be lovely if you could read that as a finishing.
I've come to learn a little of how pliable is hope, the way it flexes as it meets each shifting goal, how it moves with freedom, with confidence to stretch and so include what now has come to light. It seems to yield the tired limits of any former prayer, expanding, ever deepening in trust. I see the bend and bow it makes in widening its tent to give a place to changing circumstance, and yet in essence stays the same, sure in its desire that what it set its heart on here is worthy. It holds faithful to its promise that when a time has come, hope will shift its shape again to become